So going back to the NA version of the game, not talking about all those arts, loopers, and everything, we have two other servants that are going to be going up on raid up for the Little Big Tengu event. One of those servants is Ku Alter, and this is one of my favorite servants in the game, both from a character perspective and from just being able to actually use the guy. I think he's really fun to use because he is a DPS solo type servant. You may have heard of the 3-star Ku, who is just really good at, living, surviving, all that good stuff. Got a little bit of a damage buff, but they kind of cranked that up to 11 with his Berserker version because he's got a little less survivability, but he's got a whole lot more damage. And while I don't think it's very likely that anybody's going to actually summon for Ku Alter, I think it's good to at least have a video on the channel for every one of the available servants, so in case you do get him in the future, or maybe you're one of those people that actually did go ahead and summon for him, you actually know why this servant is actually pretty good. If you're a newer player and you happen to get this guy, he's really good because you can basically solo all of the content into the game until like the mid to late Lost Belts. That's where some solos can get a little bit wonky with like force supports or certain boss mechanics, like for instance removing some of his buffs, which he does kind of need. But I hope that also goes to show how good this guy actually is. So we're going to talk about him in today's video. If you have not already, make sure you leave a like on the video and you subscribe to the channel for that sweet daily FGO content. Also, if you haven't checked out the Twitch, which is linked down in the description down below, what are you doing? I stream there every weekday at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Usually playing a little bit of FGO, farming some events, taking on some challenge quests, but I've also been known to dabble in things like Pokemon, want to play some Minecraft in the future, maybe even do a little bit of Souls games. I don't know, all that stuff. I'm trying to branch out into some other different game genres as well, maybe even play with some viewers. So if that interests you guys, make sure you peep that in the description down below. But with all that being said, let's start diving into Ku Alter's kit, starting off with his hits. Now, it should really be no surprise, but this guy's rocking a triple buster deck. I said he's a DPS solo servant, and, well, they didn't really compromise on the buster cards. They want this guy to be able to buster Brave Chain even without having his NP, so what's an easy solution to that? Give him a triple buster deck. But that's not to say that his other cards are lacking. Well, his quick card kind of is. I mean, you're not really using this guy for star gen, you're using him to absolutely obliterate your enemies, but he does have a pretty decent arts card with 3 hits on it with 0.69% NP charge per attack. If you can find a way to get a crit on this card, maybe with the new Mighty Chains and whatnot, maybe you're more incentivized to go with like a Buster Arts quick chain or something along those lines. I don't know. You find a quick card on there, you get some stars, it lands on the arts card. You might gen some really good NP back, but I don't really know if you're really going to be doing crits with this guy. Again, he's kind of like more of a war of attrition type of character where you're just kind of smacking the enemy with your buster cards and just trying to live for as long as possible. But again, I'm not going to do the guy a disservice and not mention that he does have a pretty decent arts card, I suppose. But yeah, the real meat and potatoes for the servant come from their skills. Like most survivability servants, these are what are going to help them live and just outlast their enemy. Well, in the case of Ku Alter, again, it is a war of attrition. Like, he's really just trying to survive just enough to make sure that he can just splatter his enemies all over the battlefield. And that starts off with his first skill. Now, this seems like it doesn't seem all that good, right? He's reducing all enemies' attack by 20% for 3 turns, and he's reducing their critical attack chance by 50% for 3 turns on a 6-turn cooldown. You might see that and be like, that doesn't seem very, very good. But what it's doing is it's A, reducing how hard he's going to be getting hit by enemies because he is a berserker, right? He's not designed to take a lot of hits. Although between his second skill and his NP, he does have the ability to kind of take some hits, and it's because of this attack reduction on all enemies that he's able to do stuff like that. But the 50% reduction in critical attack chance is actually really nice, because while he may be able to take a hit or two, crits are going to melt his HP, but that's why he's drastically reducing the chance that the opponent is going to just randomly crit him out of the game. It's actually really, really strong. It's one of those skills you kind of just always pop whenever it comes up. I honestly hope that in the future, maybe it gets a buff where it drops like 30 stars or something, so people are more incentivized to actually level it up. But it is actually good, right? The attack buff in conjunction with other effects that he has going makes it a bit better, and the critical attack chance just pretty much ensures that he's not going to be randomly taken out by some random crit that the enemy's going to do. The second skill is pretty much like the normal Ku skill that you know and love, but a little bit weaker, right? Because instead of 3 attacks, he's only getting 2. But you'll see that secondary effect that I was kind of talking about pairing with that attack reduction. He's getting a small 14% defensive buff for those 3 turns on a 5-turn cooldown. So between kind of buffing his own defense, and again, he does have an additional defensive buff on his NP, between buffing up his defense and lowering the enemy's attack, it kind of gives him a little bit of leeway when it comes to taking an attack. Something else that's really interesting if you didn't know this, but the like volume in CE, right, the Canis one that gives you 3 free hits of invincibility, that actually can stack with the second skill. If you have that on your Ku altar and you immediately pop the second skill, it'll use those invincibilities first. And what that allows you to do is it kind of lets you start getting cooldown going on the second skill. So by the time the evasions start to wear off, you've either already got the skill back up or it's already about to come back up in like a turn or two, right? That's an interesting little combination you can do if you happen to have that CE. Because more so than the normal Ku, you probably are going to want to use that occasionally if you do have it, because the 2 it hits does sometime comes up. Like that extra hit that the normal Ku has does make him a little bit tankier. But it's still very good in keeping him alive, especially in conjunction with his 3rd skill. I know it's pretty basic, it's just a big guts. It lasts for 5 turns on a 7-turn cooldown, so essentially he's always got the guts going. I think that maybe they could throw something like a heal or a debuff cleanse or just something in here, maybe even like just an attack or a buster buff, right? If they want him to be like kind of defensive but more offensive at the same time, something like that to kind of buff up these skills a little bit. But I can understand why they don't want to throw anything on skill 1 or skill 3. Because he's already still very, very strong, right? And a 5-turn guts on a 7-turn cooldown is very strong because there's only a 2-turn window in which he doesn't have this focus sash, basically. And getting those extra lives can really be helpful because that could buy you another turn to, boom, get your second skill back or something. And then, you know, you're still in the game. You've extended how long you're going to be able to fight. So overall, while his skills are very simple, they're all very, very strong, right? There's a reason that I don't think they've touched any of these skills, because they're very strong in their simplicity, and as long as you kind of know what you're doing, you're not going to have too many problems when it comes to like soloing and beating up a lot of opponents. Now, I wanted to actually go ahead and talk about his NP, because right now it's just, you know, does some pretty decent damage. It gives him 30% attack and defense whenever it fires, so he at least gets some kind of buff to do some damage. That 30% defense, if the second skill is up, is 44% defense, so that plus attack reduction does make him a little tanky. But they're actually going to buff this in the future, so not only is that going to raise the damage scaling, he's going to be hitting a little bit harder, but it's also going to allow him to remove the enemy's defensive buffs before he does damage, basically meaning that like one of the weaknesses of Ku Alter is that since he has less survivability, the enemy can essentially like stall you out because you don't have as much time to stall them out, right? You're not like Ku where you have like infinite time to be alive, right? Ku Alter is kind of always on a clock and you're trying to beat the enemy down before they can stall you out. But this drastically helps him out in that because any defensive buffs or, you know, invincibility dodges, something like that that would stall out a turn to where Ku Alter basically has to waste a turn doing nothing and giving up more of his survivability, that really doesn't happen anymore, right? You can just run up there, remove their defensive buffs, and still do your damage because it procs first, and that makes him really, really insane. Again, I believe we get this buff during the 6th anniversary when Koyanskaya drops. I'm really looking forward to it because, man, it makes this guy kinda nutty. Again, still could definitely use some buffs in the future, right? Like, they could definitely buff skill 1, skill 3, and definitely add, like, maybe a buster buff on skill 3 that would give him more damage. It would help him kind of burst enemies down a little bit. Maybe have him, like, drop 30 stars on his first skill, right? Something like that can make it more consistent for him to do crits. It could help him out with, like, the arts card being able to refund a lot of his NP back. Just stuff like that I think could be really cool, but as we've kind of gone over in this video, he's already really solid as is. And again, if you're a newer player, one, it can kind of help you in like learning how to time your buffs and everything better, like by doing some solo events and such. I find that that's really good for newer players to kind of like practice and see how like, oh, maybe I should have timed my skills out and seen how long I could have like drawn out my buffs and like help you get a better hand on the game. But also the fact that he can pretty much take care of a lot of the very, very problematic bosses in the game, like pretty much up to like mid lost belts. Now, would I tell people to just like go out and summon for him? Probably not, right? Again, he's going to be available on like the free 5-star ticket. So once we get that, you can just pick him up for free if you've already got like waiver, you know, and you just want somebody else. The only people that I would tell to like explicitly go out and summon for this servant are people like me, where it's like Kualter is one of your favorite characters and you don't really care that you can pick him up for free. You're like, nah, I want to grab this guy now because he's so cool. So yeah, this is kind of one of those things that I don't advise you to go summon for him on the Little Big Tengu thing, because there's better, like more limited servants to go for, especially because you can get him for free during the 6th year anniversary. But if you ever do pull him in the future, you can always revisit this video and get some praise going for him and kind of know that he's a good servant to level up and use. But let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. If you have Kualter, you can let people know your experiences using him in the comments down below and be like, yeah, this guy just tears people apart. And all that good stuff. But with all that being said, I'm going to go ahead and get out of here. You guys have yourselves a nice day. Peace, late guys.